Hi, this is Pete and Nancy live. We're happy if you've joined us today. Today, what is the topic?
It's obsessive compulsive disorders.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we hear about a lot of people having OCD tendencies, which doesn't mean that you have an official diagnosis. But there may be some mystery behind this disorder. So this will just be part one, right, of a couple more.
Yeah, because what I want to kind of talk about what it is, what OCD is, it's when you have unwanted thoughts and fears that cause repetitive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And this is near and dear to my heart because I tend to be obsessive compulsive about some things. And I think I've spoke about this before, but I would often check my doors 40 times to make sure they were locked. And when I used to teach at the University of Toledo, I'd lock my doors, I'd go downstairs, I'd get in my car, and it's like, oh, I got to go back up. And I would it was hard to break the cycle.
Right, which is definitely when you have a diagnosed disorder is when it's interrupting your daily life, right? That's going to take a chunk of your day, might cause you late for work, different problems. If you have to check it 40 times, and you heard that right, 40, but Pete does not do that anymore. So there is hope for you today. He's a great person to talk on this subject because, like he said, it's happened in his life. So what do you have to say about it?
Well, one thing, usually this develops early in life, and there's a reason for it, and what happens, it gets worse. And when I look back wondering, why do I check these doors so much? In my early teens, I walked into my house, and somebody was in the house at night because the door was left unlocked, because we never locked our doors. I mean, I'm talking
years ago.
Yes, late 60s, early 70s. And when I look back, why do I think that? It was from something that happened, that trauma, because I remember I was home alone. I jumped out a window, ran to the neighbors. By the time the neighbors came back over, chairs had been overturned and stuff, but it just petrified me. And I know I hated being alone after that. It was very traumatic, and that's often what causes this. And it could, manifest itself in several things. Some of the obsessions that can happen is fear of contamination. I have a young client I've been working with. He, because of COVID, was so traumatized, he started washing his hands constantly. And then he kind of became a germophobic after that and was afraid of getting it. So I did some aversion therapy, but I remember one time I put my finger along the bottom of my shoe, I put it in my tongue, and I said, am I going to die? And he was like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. Well, he came back the next week, and I said, well, surprise, surprise, I'm still alive. And my whole point was to show him that there are times when it's a good idea to wash your hands, but some of his fears was not going to kill him. But I'll never forget when I did that, his face just dropped.
I bet when I was watching videos of real life scenarios or whatever of people and therapists or whatever, and did one on OCD, one training, and it was talking about that, and the guy had challenged the woman to leave the room without bringing her drink because she was petrified of germs, that someone would put something in the drink or take a sip out of it or whatever. And then he challenged her to come back into the room and trust him enough that he didn't do anything to the drink and take a sip. And eventually she was able to do it, but that was a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
But again, things that, why live in that much fear? Yes, there are true things that we should be in fear of, and yes, we should wash our hands, and no, we don't want to be walking around and leave our drink in, I don't know, in a bar or somewhere, but there are times that it's going to interfere in our regular day life that we just can't live like that, and then we need to go to therapy to get rid of some of those things, or at least lessen them so they're more reasonable. There are times to fear things and there are times to not.
And sometimes what you would think would trigger things is like, I'm a neat freak. My wife always laughs. If you would look at, if we went out to a restaurant, you could tell where I ate and my wife ate.
Oh, I believe that.
Because there's crumbs all over the place.
Yeah.
There's nothing on my side. And when I was kind of thinking, I wonder where that came, I remember when I was in the second grade, my mom made me this chocolate cake to take to school, and it was real crumbly. So I was trying to eat it. It was all over the table. It was all over me, and this girl walks by and goes, "Oh, what a pig." And that so embarrassed me that I realized that cycled. So it can be some things that you wouldn't really think can trigger it. Each person's kind of different. So another one is doubting or having difficulty accepting uncertainty.
Oh,
That's a big one.
And that's certainly going to trigger a lot of people now, which we are in uncertain times. Which, by the way, I'll put a plug. The T-shirt that I have today is from the Vineyard Food Pantry, which is located on Lincoln Avenue, where Sam and I serve most Wednesdays. And they are open from 10 to noon and also 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Wednesdays. When we talk about uncertainty, a lot of people are uncertain of their finances right now. Groceries are skyrocketing, and that's why last week they had 97 families that they served between 10 and 12 to give groceries to, and I know today it was probably about 82. So we're very busy, but you don't even have to get out of your car. But again, that's it's called the Hope Center Food Pantry on Lincoln Avenue. Yeah. So uncertainty of where are we going to be with COVID? Where are we going to be with our finances? Where are we going to be with political stuff? A lot of uncertainty right now where we live, and how do you handle that without that stress interfering in your life, or you getting into kind of OCD type things, circular thinking.
Exactly. Next thing is needing things in an orderly or symmetrical order. That's another thing I suffer from.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was in Walmart. This has been about a year ago now, and somebody went by and knocked off some vitamins. So I picked it up, and then I noticed everything was out of order, and I found myself arranging everything, and I turned around, and there was this associate on a ladder stocking some of the upper shelves. She looked at me and says, "You want a job?"
Yeah.
And you'll often notice people will arrange things a certain way. I mean, I may be doing better, but used to be I'd have this here, this would have to be here, so all three would be spaced a certain way. And I'll talk about that a little more. Another thing is aggressive or horrific thoughts about losing control and harming yourself or others. That's also a big one.
And again, nice people, but they might have thoughts about and obsessions about knives and different things. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another thing that some obsessions, unwanted thoughts, including aggression, sexual, or on religious subjects. People will often get obsessive compulsive. I had a friend that suffered a lot of losses, and he really became obsessed with religion, and he had some extreme thoughts about it. And so I remember, just as his friend, I kind of worked through that.
Definitely. I think it's pretty easy to do with religion also, because sometimes people can feel guilt. So like you're in church and like people go, "Oh my gosh, I don't even have any of these wild sexual thoughts." And all of a sudden I get into church and I have this wild sexual thought, and then I can't stop thinking about it, and again and again. And so when we feel guilty about things because we're worried, or we feel guilty about it, sometimes unfortunately that exacerbates that. and then you go right into the loop again, and you can't stop thinking about what you're not supposed to be thinking about. Just like if you go on a diet and say you're not going to have any chocolate, what are you going to think about all day? You're going to be thinking about chocolate. So yeah.
I have a sign in my office that said, "I'd give up chocolate, but I'm not a quitter."
That's right.
I like that one. So yeah, I had somebody got obsessed one time. A friend of mine, he used to go to this coffee shop, and there was this really pretty girl that he used to notice. Well, he walked out, she got hit by a car and died in his arms.
Oh,
and she developed this really odd compulsion about trying to find out about her life and what happened. And then it got worse because the family, he put his jacket over her, and it was a leather jacket. Well, when the paramedics took her, they took the jacket. Well, it had his name in it, so the family then wanted to know about her last moments, and so it really sent him into some obsessive compulsive things. He would literally stand on corners looking for somebody who might get hit. So again, that was a sad case. But let me talk about some of these compulsions. One we talked about is washing and cleaning. And I think we've both have clients that just get obsessed about cleaning. I know a woman that I know that was divorced several times, and she somehow developed this compulsion that the reason her other husbands left her because she wasn't a good housekeeper. So she ended up going completely the other way. And I could remember going over to her house at 12 after I remember went out with her husband to a movie. She didn't want to see Saving Private Ryan, and she's cleaning like a mad woman. And she'd get up and start. That was her whole day.
Yes, and I'll add that a couple of weeks ago we were talking about bipolar, and we were talking about manic phases. And again, you know, the difference, which we specified a couple of weeks ago, is that when you're bipolar and you're going in a manic phase, if you were cleaning, that would not be your norm. Okay? But when we talk about OCD, this is a problem that carries with them, you know, on a regular basis. They have this cleaning madness. I know I had a client, and I encouraged her. Her goal was to allow her daughter to start doing some of the housework, because she wouldn't allow her to fold the towels because she wanted the towels a certain way and all in a row and blah blah, and you should have put this one up here and whatever. And so it was a real goal of hers to finally allow her daughter to do it, knowing that when we delegate, it's not going to be the exact same. Meaning maybe the daughter did try to fold them in the right way, but it might be a little bit sloppier. She might have put this one at the front, and her mom normally did it in the back, or whatever. And it was so hard. And she said she would walk by and she would see a glance of it, and then she would say, nope, and she would close the door. And like, I'm not going to allow myself to do it. Why? Because when you feed it, then it just gets worse. And your mind says, I cannot calm down until I do this. And that's when it starts to get into the diagnosis, so to speak.
Next thing is checking. That's like when I was checking the door. I mean, I'm down to 2.
Yeah.
Although it's kind of funny, the other day I did my 2. I got in my truck to leave the office, and I really had this compulsion to check a third time. It's a good thing I did, because the door wasn't locked. So then you got to be careful so you don't fall in that trap. Because there was one exception.
Yeah.
And I could tell I was going to have to really watch this.
Yes.
Because it could trigger it all over again.
Absolutely. Slippery slope.
Yeah.
No different than one drink is, you know, not enough now if you're an addict, right? Slippery slope.
True. Another thing is counting. And see, I have to do things. I can't have 3 pieces candy or 5. I have to have 2, 4. I have to do even. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they have the same thing. They have to do something an even amount of times.
Yes. And then we also, people look at the famous Rain Man of, autism, thinking that, people are special counters, take them to the slot machines or the tables or whatever. But there's also dyslexics sometimes count and want things in certain order. So there's lots of different diagnoses that counting could be part of the effects of the diagnosis.
Do you remember Monk, the old series?
Yes,
Monk,
my parents
with
used
the
to watch
detective?
that all the time. Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious. He was so obsessive compulsive. I remember one time he was running from these guys and he had to touch every parking meter as he ran.
Right.
So that
really
was
slows you down.
they did a really good job making a comedy out of somebody's quirk. But he also, there was a serious side. He definitely had some problems too. So another thing is orderliness, where things have to be in order. I mean, it's like spacing things out.
Right.
I have seen people, I go in their houses and like their shelves, everything is spaced right, or their books are all from large to small. And, but you can do that and it's not obsessive compulsive, but if it gets in every area, I know somebody that all their books are in alphabetical order and he's got thousands of books. And he does them all in alpha, and he has to. And if it's funny, if his kids pull a book out and don't put it back in the right place, he knows that it bugs him, and he has to really fight not getting on his kids.
Yes, and not getting angry. And that's what I was going to say. That's another thing. There are people that are really organized, but if you're going over the top with your emotion and having a knee-jerk reactionary thing towards your children, your spouse, whatever, then that might mean that there's a problem there, okay? Because you should be able to be neat and organized, and somebody messed your book up, okay, it's not that big of a deal. But when it feels like it's a really big deal and you have multiple things like that, then there may be a diagnosis there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Next thing is following a strict routine that you can't break.
Yeah, that's a problem because flexibility is needed in life.
Yeah, I had a guy that I worked with overseas. Whenever we would go in a dangerous situation, he'd go. He just had to do that. He would do it repeatedly until once everything started, he was okay. But we used to just watch him like in the helicopters, and he's doing this ritual. And he, had to have things a certain way, and he went to a lot of the way he arranged his equipment and stuff was just interesting.
I had a client that I encouraged to come late. That was his goal, because he had to have order in his life, and he always had to be early. And so it was his goal to come late. And eventually one day he did it, and we really had a big laugh about it. And it was a pretty good moment because, again, before he would not have been able to be calm in that situation. It would have really bothered him for the rest of the day. But he was able to overcome that. So again, sometimes you are going to be late, and then he would be really mad at other people if they're late and they're so disrespectful to me, and how could they do that? And it's like, it's really not that big of a deal, but to him it was. And so again, this is where sometimes OCD behaviors can affect your relationships. And if that's you, I would encourage you to get some help because it's going to help your relationships.
Yeah, and the last one is demanding reassurance constantly.
Oh, yes. And I had a client that's OCD and autistic both, and had shared that he had a problem saying, "Are you having a good time? Are you having a good time? Or is everything all right? Is everything all right?" To the point that the girl was just like, "Yeah, I don't really want to date this guy." And so it can be a problem. So we would talk about how many times could he maybe count that in his head before he would say it out loud, or could he do something else instead of say it out loud, or could he only say that at the end of the date, or 2 times minimum or whatever, to work on that. And then to also feel free to share such things. It's maybe not on a first date, but with people. Sometimes, eventually you do need to share those things and see if they're like, okay, that's just how that person is, and I can live with that. It's really no big deal. Now I know They're not weird. They're just, OCD. And so, definitely things can, again, interfere.
And with a lot of these behavior, I think we all have it to a degree.
Yes.
But it's when it interrupts your lives that
Mm-hmm.
it's a kind of a problem. But on the other hand, it's funny. It can be a mixed bag. Like I have these obsessive compulsive things. I've got them under control, but it also makes me very detail oriented, attention. Yes. I'm getting better. I'm getting older because I can't remember stuff half the time. So,
but yes, there's a plus side to, and we really try to emphasize that with any diagnosis. I don't care if it's a learning disorder, what it is. There is a plus side. You see the plus side. No one's good at everything. Everybody's different, and work on what really damages and interferes your life, but there also recognize that there are other things that are really good. And another example of that is we have a youth book here that talks about, I guess, maybe higher order functioning skills, life
executive
functioning
skills.
There you are. Thank you. Executive functioning skills. And in one of those workbooks, it talks about, I remember doing this with a client, like, okay, you're ADHD, so what would you do well at and what would you not do well at? And it talked about some of the pluses. And so I think those are a real good thing to look at always. And if you can't figure those out, and you're feeling down about yourself, then that's a great thing to ask a therapist. Can you help me out with the plus side, because sometimes my days feel pretty gray with this diagnosis of blah blah blah.
Yeah, and like I said, this week I just wanted to kind of throw the term out there, give you some examples of it so you can recognize it either in yourself or other people. And then next week I'm going to talk about things you can kind of do to deal with it. The one thing I'll throw out, one of the things important was me was starting to address it with a sense of humor. And then I think sometimes you can fight stuff. I just kind of realized this is who I am, so I'm not going to struggle with it, and I'll get control of it. But that's probably as much as I want to go into it now. But it's an interesting condition.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. So if you would like to know more about OCD, then join us next week, Wednesday, the same time, around 1:30. Remember to put your little reminder bell here on Facebook to remind you when we go live if you'd like to see more. If you have a comment about this or something that you would like to for us to speak rather about at a different time, feel free to write that down. If you need some help, you can contact us right here on Facebook. Look at our website or give us a call at 217-419-4713. Thanks so much, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.
And to that little girl that teased me about my cake, I remember who you are.
Uh-oh.